Hello, greetings everyone. Cooperman257 here with the Ghost, aka Tom, to discuss another political discussion. The night before the 2026 local elections, our final predictions, and the aftermath of those results, basically. Say hello, Tom.
Yep. So
Yeah.
where to start then?
Well, let's see. Well, I could just quickly do a bit of self promotion here, if you will. Actually, I have discussed the local elections before with Cameron and someone else from Swiss's viewership, as you can see here, which I'm a bit surprised by the view numbers, just before the locals, as I've been trying to get Tom to do this beforehand. But I figured, why not do one last prediction and all that stuff before, the election, just the night before or something. So, yeah, let's see, you're here now. And yeah, so I begin. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Yeah, okay, in that case, I'll probably start with my sort of thoughts on the locals campaign and how everything's gone, essentially. Because it's been one that's a bit more active than usual, probably because there's been so many different things that have happened throughout the last few months. The Mandelson debacle, the Iran war, uh, the Gorton and Denton by-election fallout.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it's not been a particularly good um, situation for the government, to say the least.
No, it's just like for them, everything that can go wrong has gone wrong.
Yeah, it's essentially Murphy's Law, the government, pretty much. Like, nothing.
Oops, Tom, it seems the device is not connected. It seems like something has happened. I'm just waiting to see if we can load. But as Tom was sort of saying, everything that's gone wrong has gone wrong, and so yeah, let's see. As a result, let's see. These results are looking to be very poor and dire. I believe. There we go. Tom's back. So it's good to have you back. So I don't know what happened there, but yeah, you're
Yeah,
saying it was going Murphy's Law, basically.
all right, yeah. Basically, it's not been going particularly great for the government. Like everything that could have gone wrong for them has gone wrong for them, and it doesn't. And the locals seem to be a continuation of that trend. In terms of the actual breakdown of how the locals will be going, in many ways, this kind of feels like a dress rehearsal general election or a mini general election
I
because there's
believe this is what people have been saying. This is the closest we get to a US midterms, right? Mhm.
essentially, yeah, in terms of how these particular locals are going. Um, the locals that we have this year, we've got English council elections. I think there's like thousands of seats up for election um, across all the country. All
Yeah.
all the London borough councils are up for election. All of West Yorkshire's up for election. Um, but you've also got a mixture of councils as well. You've got like county councils as well as local councils.
Yeah, I believe the Wikipedia map is showing many of the areas that are particularly being run, like London here, as you can see. These are
Yeah,
apparently the county councils,
yeah,
and
well,
uh, and basically all the London boroughs we see here,
yeah, all the
metropolitan
London
ones.
for
So go on.
election. I was going to say, yeah, all the London boroughs are up for election. Um, been quite a long time since those were last up for election, from what I remember.
I think it was
Um,
either 2021 or 2022.
I think it was 2022. Um, yeah, I think it was. Last time I remember them being up was 2028, not 2028, 2018. Um, so yeah, I think it was 2022 because every 4 years the borough council elections.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a very wide range of a real mix, mainly in urban areas, though, is where it's being held at the moment.
Hmm.
And a real large portion of the electorate is voting in these as a result. Um, so that's for England. There's also mayoral elections, although people don't pay that much attention to them because
Uh,
they're not as big as the ones that we had before.
Hold on, Tom. Could you raise your voice a bit? Josh or Skullman here is asking to raise the voice. You're sounding quite quiet, and I can't seem to figure out how to edit mic settings. Let me
Um,
just.
I'll try if that is any better.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better, but yeah. Anyway, Apollo TD said Manson had captured Tom earlier, as both of them said hello earlier, so they at least are viewers right now. But yeah. But anyway, you were saying, sorry, go on.
Yeah, but basically, I'm saying. So that's for England. Very wide range of council elections, and county council elections as well. But the ones that are also up for election in addition to this are also the Welsh Senedd and the Scottish Parliament are also up for election as well.
Oh,
And
yes. Hmm.
and
Go on.
these are and these are kind of predicted to be quite historic in a lot of different ways, particularly the Welsh Senedd. The Welsh Senedd, ever since it was created back in 1999, has been continuously ruled by the Labour Party, some form or another. And for the first time since it was created, and for the first time in a century as well, um, the Labour Party is projected to not only lose control of the Senedd, but also come third in the Senedd, which is just an absolutely remarkable achievement because that
Uh,
has never happened in
yeah, you
history.
can see the sort of previous Senate results here for the last 6 elections. They've won 6 in a row, which is kind of unheard of in UK politics, really. Winning so many elections at once. Oops, sorry, I've got my alarm on. I'm just trying to turn it off. I always forget this alarm is on. But yeah, but as we can also see here in the House of Commons, particularly from 1945, Welsh Labour has always been the largest party. There may be periods where they lose a few seats, but it's still enough to make them the largest party. And I think arguably you could say around 1997 and even to some extent 2024, where they basically all but a few seats as their peak, if you will. I was supposed to also 1966, but yeah, they do. Wales does particular well, but now this first ever election, if you will, is the first time that they're actually going to lose. And of course, there's also this is also the first time the Senedd elections have sort of changed their voting system. Well, added extra seats, if I recall, right? Oop. Tom has been. Oh, Tom, you got removed from stage again. Sorry. It's
Yeah,
but you
don't
probably
know
heard
why.
what I've just been saying. Sorry.
Yeah, I heard what you were saying. I don't know why it keeps doing this, but let's hope that this holds out at least anyway.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah,
but yeah.
basically, yeah, it's a very remarkable situation, Wales, at the moment, what has happened there, and how it's probably going to be an awful night for Labour there. I mean, things are so bad for them in Wales at the moment that the woman who is the Welsh Labour leader is projected to lose her seat,
Wow.
which is quite a remarkable achievement, to be honest with you, considering that Labour have been utterly dominant in this seat, in this region of the world, and she's a list candidate, so she's got 6 chances to get elected, and she won't even win re-election. I
What's
mean, that is pretty bad, and it just shows you how dire Labour's situation is at the moment.
Oh yeah, and arguably she'll probably be the first head of state of like of any form of UK governance that probably loses her seat since ages, if you will. Because I don't think even when Scottish Labour lost the first lost the Scottish Parliament, I don't think the first minister that was Welsh that was Scottish Labour at the time lost his seat, right? I could be wrong on that, but
Not at the devolved level, no. They never lost their First Minister candidate or their leader at the time. Jim Murphy was the leader of Scottish Labour back in 2015, and he lost his seat. But that was Westminster, not the Scottish Parliament, so it's a bit of a different story there.
yeah. But that was like the closest you could argue, but
yeah,
but,
that was the closest you could argue. But it's really stretching it.
and
But no, I can't think of any example in recent history where a national leader of one of the Westminster or the devolved parliaments has lost their seat.
fair enough. Yeah. Anyway,
just really high.
as we can see, Scommon says here it's now a 16 consistency system with 6 seats each, and talking about how Elard, Morgan, Standing, and Crediton, Labour won't make the 12% threshold for her to be re-elected, saying this is a doomsday event for Labour. Arguably, yes. And also, given not only is Welsh Labour, let's see, the SNED, you also mentioned the Scottish ones, which arguably this is the let me just go back. The Scottish Parliament, if you will, is also running again, and for what looked like Scottish Labour was going to do well in these Synod elections, if you will, but it looks like they're, at least initially, but due to the events of Labour just being so bad at government, if you will, it looks like for the first time. Oops, I'm just but yeah, it looks like for the first time, Scotland. It looks like once it gets Scott for the first time since what was it, the 2011, let's see, Scottish elections, that the SNP might actually get a majority, which is a bit staggering when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite incredible, to be honest. This is another area where Labour has had a massive fall from grace, because this was another place where Labour was predicted to do extremely well. Like, they were predicted to even potentially win control of the Scottish Parliament off of the SNP.
Which is saying something because they've been ruling for like it's the ages now, I believe. Let's see, and then not only that, it seems like god damn it, Tom's been disconnected again. Oh boy. On, let me just try and see if Tom is going to come back, but yeah, Scottish Labour looked like it was going to come back on top, but then due to like all the years of scandal, like last 2 years of scandal with Labour and government, the SNP have slowly crawled their way back. And not only is the SNP likely to, let's see, come in first, maybe get a majority, or at least working with the Greens, or even a largest minority coalition, if you will, Labour isn't looking to come in like second or even third place, if you will, and looks like Reform is going to take over as the main opposition. Now, I believe the Scottish Tories at one point were the main opposition, but Keir Mageddon, as Josh is pointing out here, but yeah, Keir Mageddon, but yeah, for the this is a bit historic because from what it looks like, Reform is going to come in second, not only in Scotland but also in Wales, putting itself as like the main right-wing opposition to both national parties, if you will. And as a result, let's see, push towards more people. If you want a more conservative or more right-leaning government, your best bet is Reform, not the Conservatives. So even though Labour's going to get a bit of an Armageddon, it looks like the Tories aren't going to have much hope either of recovering from like the 2020 elections. I mean, the 2024 elections. So yeah. Anyway, I'm still just waiting on Tom to return, if you will. But at the moment, let's see. As Josh is saying, saw a poll earlier that had Labour back in the second for Scotland. Okay, well, that would probably be the best case scenario for them if they do not come back. Let's see. So yeah, I'm just going to go to Election Map UK's Twitter, so I can take a look at some of the polling that he has done while I'm waiting for Tom to come back. As we can see here, he is. This is like the recent nowcast for the Senate elections. Plaid Cymru on like 29.8% with like 37 seats. Reform on 34. Labour on 13. Greens on 6. Conservatives on 6. Greens on 5. Lib Dems 1, if you will, which, as you can see here, means that Plaid Cymru would need at least Labour, or at least Labour and the Greens, to do some sort of coalition, if you will, in order to like have a bit of a stable government. But yeah, and we've got Scotland saying can't say the same for Wales. Seen polling showing them somewhere between third and last, which is ouch. I'm just hold on a sec. I'm just gonna just message Tom to see how he let's see. Skullman is believing that polling is showing Plaid at 45 and Greens at 4, which will equal 49. I'm not sure if that's his predictions or if that's what some polling is showing. But if that is going to be the case, then Plaid Cymru will be able to do a government without the Labour Party, which will be a very historic thing. I'm just on a second, just checking on Tom. I'm just going to message Tom and see if he is fine or not. But it's taking a while. But yeah, but arguably this would probably be the ideal outcome for Plaid Cymru. They can't really. These elections aren't designed to give people majorities, but let's see. Arguably, these elections are not like these elections are not ideal for to get a majority. They're supposed to be like coalitions of minorities, but arguably for the Welsh, for Plaid Cymru, it'd probably be a good idea to have the Greens only because Welsh Labour will probably have like a grudge, and they would probably try and sabotage Plaid Cymru as much as possible, or at least force them to like have their way. Let's see. I'm just messaging Tom now saying, "Are you okay?" But yeah, as Skullman's pointing out, saying that this is an EM seat model, and for him, 9 different majority. So yeah, arguably, this would be historic because this would be the first time that Welsh Labour is in government without. Wales has a government without out Labour in some form, and Scotland says, yeah, Labour won't work with Plaid. They don't work with the SNP, arguably so. I do know there was an election where they had no choice but to work with each other in the past before, when Labour did not get enough to just have with one party, and Plaid Cymru also didn't have enough to get with one party. And unfortunately, Lib Dems, Tories, they needed both, if you will, and they of course refused to work together. So Welsh Labour and Plaid Cymru had no choice but to work with each other. Now, arguably, that's not what ideal, probably, but yeah, and I'm just but arguably, that government was probably not ideal for either of their supporters, since basically you had basically the two opposition parties of Wales working for that period of time in government. Now it was the only way to form a stable one. But now that Plaid Cymru is now able to, Labour has gone into coalition with Plaid in the past, but I don't think they would want to do it now that they're a smaller party. Arguably, yes, and arguably they'll be resentful for taking the votes. So, but yeah, and I'm going to try and see if I can invite someone else. Let's see. Let's see if. Let's see. But yeah. But yeah. Oh boy, it's a bit. Let's see. I did not expect Tom to be this absent for long, but I'm sure he'll try and come back as soon as he can. Let me take a look at the chat. Coalition. Okay, no, don't see Tom at all in the chat, so I'm just gonna have to keep chatting for myself. But yeah, but yeah, Welsh Labour is maybe he's having internet issues. That's unfortunate because he is arguably the guy I wanted here the most. But yeah, while that's going on, let's see. But yeah, Plaid Cymru. Let's see. This is arguably, if Plaid Cymru gets in with just the Greens, this is their chance to try and show the Welsh people that they can that they can, let's see, run the country of Wales, and if they do well, this might, let's see, result in them gaining seats and keeping seats not only in the Senedd elections, but the next time there is general elections in the UK Parliament in arguably 2029. And if that's the case, this will be like a definite crisis for Labour, because, as I think Tom would probably say, while Labour has never really needed Scotland to form a majority in some of their elections, which that's always like the sort of census that Labour needs Scotland in order to govern. But they apparently would be able to do so. There's been a few times they've been able to do so without Scottish Labour. But at the very least, that's because they had Wales. But if they lose Wales, that's about 25 to 30 seats, if you will. And Tom, you are back. Hopefully
Yes.
that was the last issue, but yeah.
Yeah, hopefully it was. Anyway,
I'm not sure if you listened to anything what I've been saying, but I'm basically just saying that while you were gone, I am talking about how now if the Plaid Cymru does well in government, but this is more an aftermath probably. This might do well for the Parliament, and this might also lead to let's see Welsh Labour losing Wales in the general elections. But yeah, I'm just showing this polling of Plaid Cymru, which are from Election Maps UK, which is currently the nowcast, though. I think as you can see here, from Skullman's topics, that's apparently from an EM seat model. Plaid 45 and Greens +4, which is likely 49. I know. I suppose this is a good time to ask, what do you think is the likely outcome for the Welsh elections?
Oh, in terms of vote share, I can't really give an exact prediction because of how all over the place it is. So I'll just go for in terms of ranking, like which party will end up where in terms of positioning. Plaid will come first and be the largest party in the Senedd, the most seats and the most votes. Reform will come second, and Labour will come third and a very distant third. Then the Greens will come fourth, and the Tories will come fifth, and the Liberal Democrats will come sixth. Um, for the best case scenario for each party, I would probably say that Plaid, the best case scenario for them is that they end up winning around like 42 to 45 seats.
Yeah, kind of
Labour's
like what
best case
Josh is saying here. Sorry, go on.
Labour's best case scenario is they win 15 seats. Reform's best case scenario is they win like 30 odd seats. The Tories' best case scenario is they win like 5 or 6 seats. And the Lib Dems' best case scenario is they win like 3 seats.
Okay.
The Lib Dems, on a very, very good night, will win Brecon, one of the Cardiff seats, and if they're very, very, very lucky, they'll win one of the Ceredigion seats.
Okay.
But that's it for them. They won't win any more than that. And even then, winning those seats is a massive ask. More than
Okay.
likely, they'll just win Brecon, and that'll be what they end up winning. Labour isn't going to win a single seat in a constituency vote. They're polling far too low in order to get a seat in a constituency vote. So their votes will come entirely from regional lists only. And Plaid and Reform will be the only real parties that end up winning in both constituency and regional votes. But everybody else is only going to get their seats through the regional votes.
Okay. So, what do you think the worst case scenario is for each party?
For Plaid, I'd probably say the worst case scenario for Plaid is they probably get something like 32 seats, which would be a very underwhelming result for them. For Reform, their worst case scenario is about 25, 23 seats. Labour's worst case scenario is getting 6 seats, where they just get absolutely vaporised. Tories' worst case scenario is like 3 seats. The Greens' worst case scenario is 0 seats, as is the Liberal Democrats.
Okay. But yeah, as Skullman saying, it's a great night. Oh, and a great night to pick up second Brecon in four seats. I think the Lib Dems, and thinks a mid for 30s for Plaid is a bad result. Labour's worst scenario is they don't win anything. Same for the Tories. And he also posted here earlier. Senedd is pretty unpredictable. Greens are a wild card, so yeah, arguably the Greens may determine how it will be for like Plaid, I guess. But
Yeah, the
but
Greens are the biggest wild card in Wales because they're a very unknown quantity within Wales at the moment. They could do a very real big upset where they eat massively into Labour's vote. And if that happens, Labour will basically just completely collapse because most of their vote has already been taken by Plaid. So if the Greens do unexpectedly well, then Labour could just be reduced to like 3 seats, or if the Greens do exceptionally well, Labour could just be completely wiped out in the Senate and just get like 0 seats, which that is extremely unlikely. I might add, it is extremely unlikely they won't get any seats. But if Labour get like 0 seats as a result of an unexpected Green surge, then wow, because that will be the first time in history since Labour formed as a political party where they get literally no seats in Wales. Like, even back in the year 1900, when Labour stood in Parliament as the Labour Representative Committee, that's what they called themselves back in the 1900 election, they were even able to get some seats in Wales. Getting literally 0 seats in Wales is just it's 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 just phenomenal. Like, you can't really compare it to anything else because it's a precedent in of itself.
Yeah, I don't think you. The only thing I can think you could compare is like 1997, 2001, and even 2024, where the Tories had no seats in Wales, I think. But even then, but arguably, if they don't have any seats in Welsh Labour, I think not only would people be calling for Starmer to go, but I think they would also be calling for his head. But but that's probably more of a bit later. They got one seat in 1900. But yeah,
To be honest, if Labour literally got 0 seats in the Senate, I think at that point Starmer would have no choice but to resign on Saturday afternoon because it's like getting like literally not a seat in Wales is just a historic fumble. It would be the equivalent of the Tories getting 0 seats in like I don't know, Surrey, for example. Like getting 0 seats in Surrey is like an impressive fumble. Or the equivalent of it would be like the SNP getting 0 seats in like Aberdeen, which is like 60, or Dundee, which is like 60% pro-independence. It's like if you can't win here, you can't win anywhere, basically.
as Josh saying, he'd be disposed that Saturday. But yeah, anyway, I suppose we should probably now get onto the Scottish prediction, as apparently this is some of the final now cast, with some thinking that the SNP will get 58. I mean 56, Reform 19, Labour 17, Greens 14, Conservatives 12, and Lib Dems 11. Which I do think this might be a bit underestimating the SNP, but arguably some people are. It seems apparently the SNP's vote has declined somewhat, but before that, many were predicting that the SNP would likely get, like, say, 60s or even higher, if you will. Some even thinking they get enough to govern by themselves. I think, as I was saying earlier, for the first time since I think 2011. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about the SM? What is your prediction for the SNP? I mean, the Scottish result. I
Oh,
assume that S&P is number one.
but the Scottish result, it's more or less a status quo outcome. Like the Scottish Parliament isn't as interesting in terms of outcomes the Welsh Senate is because nothing's going to fundamentally change in government composition compared to 2021. The result of the Scottish Parliament will basically be the SNP will come first, the Reform Party will come second, Labour will come third, the Greens will come fourth, the Tories will come fifth, and the Lib Dems will come sixth. And the end result of that will basically be a SNP Green coalition. I don't think the SNP will get enough seats to form a majority. So it'll be essentially an SNP Green coalition with a reduced majority,
Yeah, that's what
which is
Josh thinks.
which is basically just the exact same outcome that we had in 2021. So no real significant change on that part in terms of government composition, apart from the government in Scotland is just a little bit weaker than it was before.
Yeah, arguably, which in some ways, I think some you could argue it would have been better if Scotland had its elections in 2024, besides like the general election, because at least then you might have actually had a bit of a shake-up, because that was basically when all the SNP scandals were going on. But
Oh,
since that,
if there's one person who is furious about the way things have gone in Scotland right now, that's Anna Sawar, who is probably enraged about the fact that Starmer has completely tanked his chances of being First Minister. Because after the general election in 2024, Anna Sawar looked like a First Minister in waiting, and all the polling showed that, with polls showing that Labour was overtaking the SNP, and there was a real genuine chance that they would be the largest party in the Scottish Parliament, and they would be able to form a unionist coalition with Anna Sawar at the head of it. But unfortunately, thanks to Labour and Starmer's continuous failures over the past 2 years, that hope is now finished. And now it looks like Scottish Labour is going to reach their absolute nadir and just lose more seats. Um, I mean, I think that is part of the reason as to why he called for him to resign back in February, because he was just furious with him that he tanked his chances of being First Minister. I also think the other reason he did it as well was to try and claw back some support from Scottish voters, where basically he was trying to define a clear and obvious difference between Scottish Labour and, well, the rest of Labour, or English and Welsh Labour, by basically saying, look, I'm not affiliated with Starmer. I'm calling for him to go. Please vote for me because I'm not Keir Starmer, essentially. That was his pitch to Scottish voters. It hasn't worked, but I think that was one of the reasons, motivating factors as to why he called for him to resign back in February.
I'm be surprised if he's also the first one to call to say Starmer has to go after
Oh, he'll
results. And sorry, go
Oh,
on.
he'll definitely reiterate that again. Like, as soon as the results come in, he'll call for him to go. That's a pretty much guaranteed certainty that he'll do that.
Uh-huh.
Another person I think who will also do that will be the Welsh First Minister, because she's going to lose her seat, like 100% guarantee. Labour's not even within margin of error of winning that seat. Like, they're polling at about 7 to 8% in the Ceredigion seat that she's running in, and you need 12% of the vote in order to meet the quota, and she won't do that, so she's got no chance of being re-elected. And the the news reports that have come out today have basically been her saying that, yeah, we're doomed. We've got no chance of winning this election. And frankly, a good night for us would be if we come third at this point because of how bad we're doing. And a big reason as to why we're doing so bad is because of Starmer being so terrible and that he frequently comes up on the doorstep. So at this point, she hasn't officially called for him to go, but she's basically called for him to go. And I suspect that when the results come in for the Senate and it's revealed that she's not going to be re-elected, she'll probably call for him to go at that point officially, rather
Uh,
than skirting around the edges.
oh yeah. Scoma and or aka Josh has said Anna's called Keith to go on, and now today Ellen has as well and has turned on him. I mean NS, sorry, and him too low, but he thinks it's a little too late, I think. Which arguably, do you think if Welsh Labour did what Anna Sarwar tried to do and say Keir needs to go, you think that might have saved them, or you think that would have done no difference?
I It wouldn't have saved them, that is absolutely certain, but I think it would have called them back a little bit more support, where essentially I think what it would have done is, instead of polling on average 15% in the poll, no, not 15%, 12% in the polls at the moment, like they are, I think they could have gotten up to 15%, maybe even 18% if they were exceptionally lucky. But even then, they still would have finished third. The biggest problem for Welsh Labour, and the reason why they've been hammered so hard in the polls over the last couple of years, is basically because of problems of their own, as well as Westminster. Like, Welsh Labour has been terrible stewards of Wales. Like, they have done a really bad job of running Wales, especially over the last 10 years. Like, the Welsh NHS is pretty much the worst performing NHS out of all of the devolved regions, and that has happened under their watch. Wales' economy is extremely stagnant, even more so than England and especially Scotland. Um, Poverty has gone up, of all kinds. In particular, child poverty has gone up a lot under them. And in addition to generally just bad governance, they're also very incompetent. Um, they just don't seem to know what they're doing, nor do they show much interest in actually solving any of Wales's problems. And they've also had their own problems with corruption and terrible leadership. The guy that was in charge of Welsh Labour and First Minster before the current one was a guy called Vaughan Geffing, I think his name was,
I think it was
vaguely
like the
speaking.
first first Westminster or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And he was a really, really bad leader, and he got caught up in a what I think was a corruption scheme of some kind, with some sort of dodgy dealings anyway. And basically, he got exposed for doing that, and there were calls for him to resign. He point blank just refused to resign, even though he was caught doing it. And Vichy Vaughan. Oh dear. Um, but
Oh,
basically, he refused to resign, and he just dragged out his first ministership far longer than it should have gone on for. And eventually, his cabinet had to start resigning, and then eventually he was kicked out in the end. But what really angered Welsh people about this was that even after he had done all of this, been super corrupt and just a generally terrible leader of Welsh Labour, he was appointed to the House of Lords by Starmer. And so people in Wales just basically saw it as a massive slap in the face that they had had this guy, this that they had basically had this guy forced upon them after Mark Drakeford, who was a really popular First Minister of Wales, and very good Welsh Labour leader, resigned. They had this guy forced upon them. He was corrupt, he was useless, he was incompetent, he refused to leave even when his time was clearly up. And then, after doing all of that, ruining Wales and ruining Welsh Labour, his reward for doing so was being appointed to the House of Lords. It was a massive slap in the face to Welsh people, and it just showed in the eyes of many Welsh people the sheer contempt that Labour held for them, and that they were taking them for granted and just doing whatever they felt like they were doing because there was this assumption in Labour that they would just always vote for them so they don't have to bother doing anything to improve anything.
yeah.
So it's essentially a multitude of factors that have led Welsh Labour to this nadir that they're facing. It's a combination of issues that have been allowed to fester for far too long on the domestic level, and essentially their own sort of corruption, incompetence, and bad leadership. I mean, the party has basically been in terminal decline since Mark Drakeford left, and nothing that they have done has made it better. And if anything, everything they've done has made it worse.
Oh yeah, this Vicky Vaughan or Geffen, I think, as Scarman is joking here. It sounds like Starmer's government minus him becoming a member of the House of the Lords, which I think any Labour leader after Starmer, if there is one, would be wise to do is not give him a position like that, because I don't think the general public would take it as well here. But yeah, arguably, Mark Drakeford was arguably the saving grace for Welsh Labour, especially even when Starmer first became leader. If you when they did their first locals, because those locals were actually done pretty badly for them. That apparently Starmer was considering even resigning, but only stayed on because of the Batley Spen election. But let's see. But at the time, Welsh Labour was the only saving grace for the Labour Party at the time, because they managed to get a minority that allowed them to govern by themselves. I mean, granted, I knew some of my relatives up in Wales who were more not really Labour voters, let's just say. Did not like the 20 miles per hour speed run thing. I think that was arguably the only complaint I remember hearing about Mark Drakeford's Welsh government. But yeah, it's like since you've got rid of him, who was arguably one, like you said, the only few decent leaderships that Wales and Labour had. Granted, some in the Starmer right will probably say, "Oh, he was a Corbyn-backed candidate," but regardless of whether or not he was Corbyn-backed or even just Social Democrat, if you will, at least he did well for Wales. Now, the guy that they had Ritzy after him has basically killed the chances, though. Ironically, but you could argue that Wales, Scotland, and the UK had three separate leaders for like one term in Parliament, but only the SNP is going to survive like the scandals, it seems. But that's only because the scandals of like the national government. But yeah.
Yeah, just the scandals that pale in comparison to what is offered by the Labour Party. That's the kind of problem that they're faced with. But no, I mean, it's it is honestly a stunning fall from grace when you look at the differences in outcome and also fortunes compared in the last two elections. Like in 2021, for example, Welsh Labour got a majority in the Senate for the first time in history,
Yes.
and now they'll be lucky to get 15 seats.
Oh yeah. Let's see. So one thing that of note is that this parliament added, last parliament added extra seats for Wales, and this was argued to make sure that no one would get like a majority by themselves. Do you think Welsh Labour might be regretting this? But do you think they would have done better if it was the old model, or do you think they'd do even worse or something?
I think probably they would do significantly worse if the old model was in place, because keep in mind that the only reason why Welsh Labour is going to get any representation in the Senate, provided the Greens don't have an unexpected surge, that is because of the regional vote. If it was done in the old system, they would struggle to get even a single seat. So the old system would be worse for them. But as for the increasing in the number of members of the Senate, I don't think that was why it was done. I think it was a trade-off sort of deal that was done, where basically because Wales had seen its representation in Westminster cut down due to its aging and declining population, because the population of Wales has decreased over the last decade or two. The trade-off, the deal that was made is, or compromise, you should say, is that in exchange for decreased representation in Westminster, they would receive increased representation in the Senate. So that was the trade-off. For fewer MPs, they would get more MSs.
Kind of
Now,
like what happened in Scotland, right?
yeah, kind of, but I think in Scotland, they haven't had that happen in terms of MPs being cut, because Scotland's population has been on a slight increase, whereas Wales has been on the decrease.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I would personally argue that that is a worse deal to have, because of the fact that the Senate has much less and weaker powers than all the other devolved assemblies. Like they have significantly less powers than the Scottish Parliament, and they have even less powers than even the Northern Irish Assembly does. So I would argue personally that that was a worse deal and a worse trade-off. Um, in my opinion, the deal probably should have involved the Welsh Senate getting more powers to put it on an equal par with the Northern Irish Assembly, but that wasn't included. So, yeah,
Okay. Fair enough. Let's go. Man is saying here. Funny thing is, the new system is we have to compromise by Mark. He wanted us to move to an STV system, I guess, like in Ireland, and says I would have preferred they gave us a proper devolution powers that essentially a glorified council. Arguably, this is probably the, I suppose, biggest problem. I mean, problem with the Welsh elections, if you will, is that they're basically they're like you said, they're the weakest councils. But there's so much that the Welsh government's been blamed for, but they have little power to do so, and the power they do have, while arguably under Mike Drakeford, they seem to have done pretty well, but under of course, like Welsh Labour, they've done poorly. Granted, let's see. We'll have to wait and see if Plaid Cymru will be able to do anything even slightly better. But I suppose it's probably time to get into like the predictions that are of the basically the center of the United Kingdom, the English locals, and apparently, let's see. You've been having like where do the polls say in April? Apparently, like from this article here, let's see, the average of being like Reform 26, Labour 19, Conservative 18, Greens. This is, I think, general elections, but people have been taking note of like the local elections, if you will, and I think there have been some predictions. Ah, yeah, here where Labour is expected to have gone from like 2,196 seats in the last one to being between 400 to 600. Tories about 1,000 to like 500 or 700. Lib Dems going from 600 to either 700 or 900. Greens 170 going to like somewhere in the thousands. And Reform from 78 to like either 1,500 or 1,600. So a lot of people are predicting some very high numbers, as you can see from this sort of like polling here. And Skullman's predicting that Labour's going to lose at least 1,800 seats. So yeah, what do you think about in terms of seating for like Welsh, I mean, for like the general local elections, how many councillors do you think are going to be gained or lost for each respective party?
Well, I think that by far the biggest loser of the council elections is definitely going to be Labour. Like that goes without saying, they're going to get smashed. Like 70, I think the average shows that Labour will lose about 75% of their councillors in the locals. So that's going to be pretty terrible for them. I think my prediction is that in terms of the different parties, I would say it would go like this. I think that Labour will lose 1,700 councillors tomorrow. The Tories will lose about 600 councillors. The Greens will probably gain about 800 councillors. Reform will get about 1,300 odd, give or take, and the Liberal Democrats will gain 200, and everything else will go to independents. Independents will probably gain about net of 100.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what I think will happen. Basically, Labour will be completely wiped out. The Tories will do incredibly badly. Reform will do incredibly well. The Greens will do very well, and the Lib Dems will do middlingly well.
Okay, so just to make sure I heard it right, let's see, the Labour losing like 1,500, did you say, or was it 1,700 or
1,700?
1,700? The Tories will lose 600, did you say, or was it 400? Did you say
600. Tories will lose
600?
600.
Reform over 1,000.
Yep.
Greens 800.
Yep.
Lib Dems likely 100.
200, I said.
200, and Independents 100. All right.
Yeah.
So arguably these will be some very, it's particularly Labour. This will be arguably the worst local election results in ages. I think. I mean,
In terms of raw percentages, in terms of like percentage of seats lost, it will be the worst local elections defeat in history. Not in terms of raw numbers, that still goes to John Major in 1997, who lost 2,000 councillors. But in terms of percentages of seats lost, yeah, it will be the worst local election results ever for any party, because no party has ever lost 75% of their seats.
and take it not even Blair's worst results when the New Labour was in government was this bad, right?
No, nowhere near as bad as this.
Oh yeah, but arguably, but yeah, this is like but yeah, so it's like with we got a comment from Apollo TD here, who's been a while since we've seen him here, but saying that the Senate really need more MS, I guess more politicians gives us more public voices for more money, and transport demands from various political figures. Arguably, let's see, probably they didn't. They probably needed more MPs of anything, but arguably, if they get at least, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, my sort of belief is that if you're going to cut the number of MPs a region of the country has, then you should balance it out by adding extra politicians in local areas, because I think it would be unfair for a number of politicians to just be cut from an area, even if their country's population is in decline, then and not give them anything in return.
Oh
I
yeah,
just
at the
think
very
it's
least,
kind of unfair, really.
at the very least, give more power to the Welsh Senate at least. So
Yeah, I think that would have been the other compromise that could have been made. If you didn't want to have more MSs or MPs, then you should have given the Welsh Senate more powers. I think that would have been the other potential compromise that would have been okay with most people. If you want to cut the number of MPs while keeping the number of MSs the same, then give the Senate more powers.
mhm. Okay. So arguably, I suppose with like all these predictions, it's like Labour doing disaster in Wales, disaster in Scotland, and disaster in England, basically everywhere except Northern Ireland. But that's because no one. That's because none of the main parties would dare campaign in Northern Ireland, if you will. Well, maybe the Tories would, but they don't get
Well, the
anything.
Tories do, but they're the only ones.
But yeah, much to the dismay of like well, let's see, Northern Irish Labour, which is a bit baffling that it exists, but hey, but but yeah, but they'll all do. Let's see, all do as well. This is going to be a very poor aftermath, and I think if you probably type in Keir Starmer, let's see, I think there'll be calls. Let's see, for Starmer is facing challenges, and as you can see here, calls for him facing challenge. Let's see, Starmer doing last ditch attempt. Many will be calling, as we were talking a bit earlier, people will be calling for Starmer's head, if you will, and if depending on how badly, go immediately or go in the near future. So yeah, arguably Labour's arguably probably be the first aftermath we can talk about. Oh, I think Scoman says I think anyone will get full powers in the same way. The only way the SNP would get another rep is if it would have to be a realignment for entering a coalition with Labour and a minority in 2029. Fair enough. And Apollo TD says tomorrow today is the first time I'm voting in person since 2023. Before then, my last person vote was in 2019 locals EU elections. I voted in 2018 in person first time too, and another G. Okay, we'll get more to that later. But yeah, arguably, if the results are bad, you think Starmer will either go willingly or being booted out? What do you think is more likely to happen for Labour's aftermath?
In terms of the aftermath of what these results would be, I guess starting with Labour would be the best place to go. I think that the aftermath of this for Labour is basically going to be a long, hot summer for them, where basically they're just going to be in complete civil war and disarray, and the whole summer is just going to be defined by Labour infighting over Starmer and also just Starmer, the locals, the direction of the party, and so on and so forth. There's going to be multiple flashpoints that are going to happen during this, but the immediate aftermath, I think, is going to go something like this. I think that multiple MPs are going to go and call for Starmer to resign. All the people who have called for him to resign will reiterate that. I think that the Welsh Labour leader will call for him to resign. Sawa definitely will, but he will refuse. He will not go. He will fight any leadership campaign tooth and nail because he is as stubborn as a mule and just will not budge at all. Um, for a whole host of reasons. A lot of it is pride and ego. Like I think I remember reading a story from Alex Wickham, who's essentially his like chief media guy essentially. And he basically said, Starmer said in that interview, or to an aide in private, that one of the reasons why he doesn't want to leave willingly is because apparently he would never forgive himself if the public never found out who he truly was as a leader, whatever that means.
Well, as
Um,
far as everyone's concerned, you're terrible.
yeah, like I mean, God only knows what that means, but that was basically one of his excuses that he gave. Um, but no, he won't go willingly. He will fight tooth and nail to stay in charge. And I think that that is going to infuriate backbench MPs and lead to a big rebellion from them and lead to also the PLP just voting against any sort of motion that doesn't directly threaten the government's stability. Like, at that point, I could see the PLP basically just voting everything down without, in order to get major concessions, if it's not related to like a confidence vote in the government. And even in a confidence vote, they may just use that to get concessions out of them. But I think the real flashpoint and the thing that will really kick off the Labour Civil War is I think that within a week of the results, I think that Andy Burnham will probably announce his intentions to return to Westminster and will probably say that he has a path back to Westminster and that he intends to stand in a by-election in the north, somewhere in the northwest of England, particularly within the Greater Manchester Merseyside area. And I think that when that is announced, there will be a wait for whoever stands down to trigger a by-election to get Burnham in. And I think that when Burnham announces his candidacy for that by-election, Starmer, just like with Gorton, will immediately vote it down. And I think that when that happens, the Labour Civil War will begin in full force because the PLP, especially the soft left, will be enraged over it because it will show that Starmer is not listening, not changing, and is willing to sacrifice the entire Labour Party in order to save his career and his premiership. So I think that at that point, you'll probably see much more prominent figures call for him to go. People like Angela Rayner, Lucy Powell, all the Burnham gang basically will like call for him to resign, and will probably even resign from the cabinet in order to kick him out. Um, but he's so insanely stubborn that I wouldn't put it past him to do what John Major did in the mid 1990s, where there is a leadership contest and he tries to be on the ballot. So essentially, do what John Major did, like try and call the MP's bluff, where he goes, there is a leadership election, and he stands in it to try and win it. Like he's that stubborn, I can see him doing something like that.
Okay.
Um, which will just again it'll just further fan the flames of the Labour Civil War, and it will be a disaster. Like the whole summer will just be defined by constant non-stop Labour infighting that will carry on all the way through until Labour conference,
It's
and
a
that
bit.
will probably and I think that Labour conference will be like the breaking point where Starmer will have just no choice but to go by that point because if he doesn't, he seriously runs the risk of just fully splitting the Labour Party. Um, Sort of similar to what happened with like Change UK and Corbyn. So I think at that point his position will just be completely untenable and he will have no choice but to go.
Ironically, in some ways, Starmer's probably acting in what he thought Corbyn was always. like an ego-driven politician that refused to go when his time was up, and nearly brought the Labour Party to the brink of death.
Oh yeah. But then again, Starmer's famous for his hypocrisy, so that's not really anything shocking. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
so
a
that's
few.
what I think will happen for Labour. Basically, it will be a long, hot summer of civil war for Labour that will carry through until Labour conference, and I think that Labour conference will be the breaking point
Oh,
where
yeah.
Starmer will have no choice but to go, because if he doesn't, he runs a risk of seriously splitting the Labour Party.
Okay.
Um,
So,
as
yeah.
for the Tories,
Before you get
um,
to that, Tom, I just want to put some comments. Apparently, Apology says Blair's worst result was 1999. Major was 1995. Keith will be around the punching bag until the move for Andy to take over Labour conference. Alec Whitman, the Secretary of State of Propaganda. Boo, Alec Whitman. Worse than changing Kane Corbyn. More Ramsay MacDonald splitting the party in three. Arguably, Rich, and yet arguably Starmer might go down as the Labour's worst prime minister since him. But I'm also wondering, despite all the civil war and the conflict, who do you think will end up replacing Starmer? Because everyone's talking about Andy Burnham, but it's like biggest problem for him is not to get in Parliament. West Streeting is arguably the right's preferred one, but there's all the Mandelson stuff that has now tainted him. Angela Rayner arguably apparently has support, but there's also a large group that would rather destroy the Labour Party and let her in. And there's also parts of the British public that absolutely hate her guts. And then there's some are thinking Ed Miliband as an alternative, but some that might be a problem. Like he lost the 2015 general election, so yeah. Or do you think there's some sort of dark horse in the race that we don't know about yet?
I think that what happens, the person who replaces Starmer, I think will really depend upon the timing of what happens in the aftermath of the locals. Um, there is the soft left is generally incredibly split about what they want to do with regards to Starmer. There is a faction within them that wants to immediately trigger the leadership contest as soon as possible just to get him out before Labour just implodes and hemorrhages even more support to the Greens at Reform than they're already losing. And that faction, generally speaking, backs Andrew Rayner. Um, there's the faction that basically wants to wait it out. They are basically wanting to wait until the NEC elections in September or August. It's one of those 2 months. And basically, they want to get a soft left NEC in charge so that they will approve Burnham's candidacy. And when that's done, they want to get back into Parliament and then have the leadership contest. There's the Labour Right faction, which is led by Wes Streeting, where basically they're kind of in two minds about what to do. On the one hand, they want to trigger it because the sooner that they trigger the leadership contest, the more likely it is that Streeting gets in, because the longer they wait, the less likely he is to win. But at the same time, the issue with Wes Streeting is the Mandelson saga has tainted him very heavily, and Labour is extremely worried about appointing anybody who has even the slightest connection to Mandelson in charge because of how much the Mandelson saga has traumatized them. So Team Wes is in a real two minds about it. Um, then there's the other contenders. Miliband's been floated. He's essentially backed by the soft left faction, and they want him in because they think he'll be a more palatable to the electorate than Rayner is. But the question is, does he even want to be prime minister? That's the problem there. And then
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is basically just a dark horse candidate, but unless they do a real stunning performance similar to what Corbyn did in 2015, I don't think any of those dark horse candidates really have much of a chance.
Yeah.
Or it could be a coronation. And if it was a coronation, the person who would probably be the most likely to succeed in that coronation agreement would be John Healey, because he's sort of seen as like a unifying figure, um, both liked by the right and the left of the party. But the problem with John Healey is I struggle to see what difference he would be compared to Starmer, and him being in charge just runs the risk of it all being Starmer 2.0. So I don't know, but
Okay.
that's the way things stand. It's a real mess, to be honest, and this whole mess is part of the reason why Starmer has lasted for as long as he has done, because his opponents and his opposition within Labour are incredibly disorganised and decentralised and uncoordinated. So he's essentially able to last much longer than he should have because of how disorganised his opposition is.
Oh yeah, it's the only thing you could argue that at least he's managed to be successful at least in terms of himself. But yeah, now, arguably I have heard that there are rumors that the NEC won't even back Starmer now, but I think those are just rumors, right?
Yeah, those are rumours, and I don't believe them myself. I
Yeah,
struggle to think
yeah,
that.
yeah. But
I struggle
argue
to believe it.
gone. You,
Um,
you struggle to
I
think that they would actually dispose of him.
yeah, I doubt it very
Yeah.
much. The NEC, I mean, Luke Akehurst, for example, is on the NEC, and there is not an iceberg's chance in hell that he will ever turn on Starmer. Like,
Oh yeah.
there's no chance it will happen.
Yeah. Anyway, Josh seems to think that it could possible that let's see, Dave Lammy might be temporary PM, which I could see option. Apology D thinks Rayner will move to after local. She won't pass it back. Apparently, Miliband is back in Burnham, so he wants Starmer to stay on longer. And then wonder if Streeting will back Starmer if Rayner goes over the top, also calls Starmer to go. Josh says chaos with Ed. But I suppose now that we've just basically that sums up everything, I suppose. What do you think is
Before
going
we
to
move
happen to
Before
the
we move on to the other ones, just wanted to quickly go through those comments and respond to them before we move on to the other ones. For the bit about Reina, yeah, I could see that happening, because Reina in the last few days has sort of come around to the point of view that I have, where I basically have the point of view that Burnham won't be back in Parliament anytime soon because the right wing of the Labour Party and Starmer will fiercely resist any attempts to let him in, even if it means burning the party to the ground. So if that's the logic that she has, if she has the same logic that I do, then you might as well go over the parapet as soon as possible in order to get your leadership candidacy in. Um, as for Wes Streeting, whether he'll back Starmer if Rayner goes over the top, I don't think he will. Because again, the issue that Wes has is that the longer it takes for a leadership contest to occur, the less chance he has of winning it because of the soft left potentially getting Burnham back in, but also the fact that he could be dragged down even further by the Mandelson saga. Because it's keep in mind the Mandelson scandal isn't over yet. There's still more to come out about him. So Wes Streeting is definitely as incentivized as Rayner is to move as quickly as possible in order to get in. So I don't think he will back Starmer, or at the very least, I don't think he will strongly back Starmer. He may give like a boilerplate, oh, we need to support the Prime Minister in these trying times statement, but it will be incredibly half hearted and nobody will believe it.
Uh-huh. But yeah, anyway, right. Let's see. Paul says Rayner has been caught in support from Hazley and II Carnes too, as well as the others across the party. And says the Times that we are reporting that Labour MPs will demand a new MP to keep Reeves for their support, as the PLP think keeps on Reeves as essential for guilt yields, not to increase massively even more. And Scarman is saying the soft left are pathetic, to be fair, which
That is true, yeah. I mean,
argue.
for
Sorry, go
the
on.
thing about Reeves, I mean, I think the smart thing would probably for the new prime minister would probably be to say that they're going to keep Reeves, but then chuck her out in a reshuffle. Like, if Starmer goes, I struggle to see that Reeves would stay because Reeves and Starmer are essentially two peas in a pod. If one goes, the other goes with them. Like, I can't see Reeves serving in any other cabinet apart from Starmer's. Like, I think that even in a Wes Streeting cabinet, it would be an ask for her to stay. I think that more likely Streeting would probably appoint somebody like Pat McFadden or Darren Jones to be Chancellor as like a safe pair of hands. I don't think they would keep Reeves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Etsy. Yeah, Etsy. She's arguably as tainted as Starmer, basically. But yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so what do you? So I suppose we've talked on Labour long enough with their civil war and infighting, and who's likely to replace them. And Scarman says the soft left are kind of pathetic. To be fair, I think the last decent soft left leader Labour ever had was Harold Wilson, but unfortunately, there hasn't been a replacement for him. It seems, though, unless you count Gordon Brown as soft left, but no, he's a mix of seems like left and right, really. But yeah, at least not as bad as a Blairite. But yeah. Anyway, I suppose it's now. What do you think is going to happen with the Conservatives?
The Conservatives are a lot easier to predict than Labour is, and I think that with the Conservatives, the best way to sum them up would be after these locals would be best described as a expression that one of their former leaders used, which is keep buggering on. Basically, I don't think anything will change with the Conservatives, and the reason for that is because even though these results are going to be bad for them, Kemi Badenoch just doesn't have anybody who is an opposition to her at all anymore. Like, if Robert Jenrick was still in the Tories, I would have said that he would likely go over the parapet and trigger a leadership contest, which would lead to Badenoch's downfall and him becoming the leader of the Tories. But because of him being incredibly sloppy with his leadership planning, he's essentially blown his chance of being leader of the Tories because, well, he's kicked out of them now and he's in reform. So I think that ultimately, I don't think anything will change with regards to the Conservatives. I think they will get a lot of negative press, but I think a lot of them, what they'll do is they'll say, yes, it was a bad result, but it was always going to be a bad result because these elections are taking place after the massive vaccine bounce that we got under Boris. And so we were always going to lose. And Kemi Badenoch is the most popular party leader in the country at the moment, according to polling. So we can't get rid of her. And so she's going to stay. I
So
think
not
that will be the logic the Tories will take in the aftermath of the election.
so
I don't. I just don't think Badenoch's going to go anywhere because she's just got no opposition to her in the Tories anymore now that Jenrick's gone.
not even James Cleverly or something.
No, I mean, the problem with Cleverly is what would even his argument be? Oh, we're too right wing, so we've got to pivot back to the centre to do what exactly? Pick off 2% of the Liberal Democrats, get them down to like 8 or 9% in the polls, which would do what? Get the Tories up by 2 points extra? I mean, great, but you're still going to be massively behind Reform and probably Labour as well. So it's like he could try, but the problem is he just wouldn't have an argument. And as a result, he would lose a leadership election very easily, and that would be the end of his leadership chances. He'd probably also get kicked out of the party as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, Badenoch is just so lucky that Gemrick is terrible at plotting, because if he had been at least semi-competent, she would have likely lost her job as a result of these local results. But because he's gone, she doesn't have any opposition left anymore, so she's
Uh,
going to stay, in my opinion.
I suppose the only way we're going to see Bagnot gone as Tory leader is, let's see, not only do they lose next election, but they don't even get in somewhere in form into government, and then who's ever left replaces her, which might be cleverly, might be someone else.
I
But
would
yeah,
say that the only way that Badenoch leaves before the next general election at this point would be if the Tories have some sort of massive scandal related to her or her leadership or their party, and then the party just absolutely collapses in polling. Like, let's say, for example, they consistently start polling at like 7% in the polls, and that just doesn't change for like a whole year, for example, and it's because of that scandal related to Badenoch. I think if that happened, they would get rid of her at that point and roll the dice with Cleverly. The other option, and the only other one I see, would be if there was a local elections result, the Lib Dems had a massive surge as a result of them winning over loads of Tory voters, and those Tory voters, and as a result of that, James Cleverly goes over the parapet and says, "We've got to move to the centre to win back the few remaining voters we're losing to the Lib Dems," and she goes that way. But outside of those two extremely unlikely scenarios, I think at this point, Badenoch is going to lead the Tories into the next general election, and she's going to be their candidate for Prime Minister, because
yeah.
I just don't see any realistic way of her being removed as leader at this point, even with these results being as bad as they're going to be.
Okay, okay, which is a bit ironic because there was a time when everyone thought when Starmer goes, she'll also likely go as well. But yeah,
Well,
anyway,
the thing is that had Generic at least been semi-competent at plotting, or at least have just put his speeches in his desk and locked the desk, then that probably would have happened. But because he's an idiot who doesn't know how to do the most basic of planning, he got exposed, and so his leadership ambitions are in tatters.
maybe this is why Farage let him join Reform, just because he know he cannot stab him in the back or something. But anyway, um, getting to comments, apologies say this is from the old one, saying I personally want Miliband as Chancellor and either Alistair or Burnham as PM. More likely to nationalise water, more rail, more nationalised interest in energy. Arguably, yeah, because that's arguably what I want Labour to do, but they won't do it right now. Scottman says send her back to the HSBC coffee room or wherever she worked. I think that might be in terms to Rachel Reeves. Ed Miliband Chancellor. Somehow Kemi holds on. Cleverly is a guy that had lost his own cakewalk election. Oh yeah, there is team screwed it up.
Oh yeah,
And
that's also another example, I think, as to why Cleverly isn't leadership material for in the Tories' eyes, because the guy completely screwed up his own election because
yeah,
his stupid backers decided, in their infinite wisdom, to massively vote for Badenoch and no, yeah, it was Badenoch. Massively vote for Badenoch, but forget to vote for have enough of them to vote for him to make sure that he would actually go through to the second round,
yeah,
and
it's
so
like at
we got
least
results.
oh yeah, if you're gonna do something like that, at least discuss okay, which of us are gonna back Bagnot and which of us are gonna make sure Cleverly is still on top. But yeah. But anyway,
Yeah,
Kemi's
that's another reason why I think a lot of Tories saw that and kind of view him as a bit of a clown as a result of it.
oh yeah.
So that's another reason why I don't think he is as much of a success at this point.
Yeah. Anyway, Kemi is Tory's least crap option right now, and she's polling much more popular than the party. Plus, she's had 18 months of name recognition now too. Clever wouldn't help. And if Davy toppled the Lib this is top and the Lib Dems move left. It's possible Cleverly or someone similar argues they should move the Stunts to still Lib Dems. We'll get to Lib Dems in a moment. And Scoman saying, same happened to Weeze lately, but Keith is too weak to do anything to him. I suppose the next party to move on to then would be the Lib Dems, if you will. The Liberal Democrats. What do you think is going to happen to them post?
The party that, in many ways, is the poster boy of British stagnation, because they, much like the country's economy, has been in complete stagnation for years at this point. The Lib Dems are in a really, really strange spot, to be honest with you, because they have been in complete stagnation since the general election, consistently hovering around 11 to 13% of the vote. And for a party that is, in terms of representation, the third largest party in Parliament, you rarely hear much of anything from them. Like the only time I can think of when I hear from the Lib Dems is when Ed Davey gets his question to ask at PMQs, and the occasional press briefing related to something or another that goes on in the country. But other than that, they just feel the best way I would describe them is essentially they're the wallpaper of British politics, where essentially they're there and it exists, but you never really pay that much mind to your wallpaper after a while. You just accept it as like a thing that exists in your house. And that's what the Lib Dems kind of are now to British politics. Like they just exist, but they don't really have anything else to them other than that. Um, I think the Lib Dems really need to think about whether it is a good idea to keep Ed Davey as leader because of the fact that he is just going nowhere with the party. They're not gaining anything, but they're not losing anything either. And I don't think it's a great idea to just stagnate forever until the next general election and not in any way, shape, or form benefit from the fragmentation of British politics. And but
it's a bit. Sorry,
but
go
the
on.
issue with the issue with the Liberal Democrats is that the argument that they can easily make is Ed Davey was our most successful leader in 100 years. He got us 70 seats in the House of Commons, and he brought us back from an irrelevant party to the third largest party in Parliament. Why should we get rid of him after that amazing record? And he's also having us net gain in seats at the council elections. Why should we get rid of him? And it's like all of that is true, but the problem is that do you want to just be the party of 11% forever, or do you want to take advantage of the fragmentation of British politics and take your own place in the sun alongside Reform and the Greens?
It's like you're
And
basically the party of default at this point.
yes, but
Because it's like you're not
but the
winning these seats because you've increased your support. You're doing it because everyone else is fractured.
yeah, I mean, but in fairness to the Liberal Democrats and to play devil's advocate for them here, where in British politics can they fit into that they don't already fit in at the moment? Like they can't go left because the Greens already fulfill that role, and so they would just lose their Tory voters back to the Tories, or more likely to Reform, or even maybe Labour if they went too far left. But at the same time, if they doubled down on the Orange Book strategy and became more right wing, they would lose their Liberal voters to the Greens. So they're in a rock and a hard place. The only thing that I think could work for the Liberal Democrats to make them gain an increase in support and relevancy would be basically if they became the tried and true social liberal party, or the big capital L liberal party, where basically they do a similar thing to what they did during the Charles Kennedy years during Blair's third term, where they double down and focus on civil liberties and they call out Labour's authoritarianism and push back against it. Basically, the way that the way to simplify them down would be if they became the liberal version of David Davis. Like, if you imagine David Davis as a liberal, that would probably be the only hope that they have to get themselves out of the 11% bubble that they're trapped in at the moment. But the problem is that this is almost impossible to do because the leadership and the membership are just not like that at all and are pretty much just as authoritarian as everyone else is in British politics. Like, that liberal tradition of standing up for civil liberties and combating authoritarianism is basically been vanquished from the Liberal Democrats, and nobody seems interested in bringing it back. It also doesn't help the fact that so much of that tendency these days is connected with the reactionary right that it turns a lot of the Liberal Democrats off of that way of thinking.
Okay. And let's see. Yeah, I suppose
So,
I don't know
so
if that.
basically, to summarize, I think that the end result for the Liberal Democrats, the aftermath for them in this election, is they will celebrate their net gain of 200 seats, but the fundamentals for them won't change, and they'll continue to just be stuck at 11 to 13% in the polls with nothing changing.
Oh yeah. I suppose the only way to that they'll end up, let's see, getting rid of him is if during the next general election, let's see, they stand and they lose a fair share of seats or something. But no, granted, no, even when a Liberal Democrat has gained extra seats after like two elections, like I think Charles Kennedy did, the Lib Dems still try to force him out at some point. So, but yeah, but anyway, a few comments I think where we're going to say like Scotland says the Liberal stagnocrats, and but yeah, the Poll TD is saying the thing with Cleverly's leadership thing is his team told him that the MPs just vote for him because it was so close, and some MPs took it upon themselves to think they were clever to vote Cameron, not Cleverly's fault. Arguably, there was some see some things beyond his control, perhaps, but yeah, like his supporters being stupid, or at least not intelligently thinking this through. Lib Dems have been pointless since Charles Kennedy resigned. That is Josh. Let's see, Apollo TD. The Lib Dems poll in 1994 to 2000 was huge. Oh, yeah. That was arguably their peak moment. Libs are the actual nothing has ever happened party. And Apollo says, the thing with the Lib Dems is they might as well call themselves the Starmer Party. Nothingness apart from the centre-left authoritarian stagnation carrying on Osbornism. Who knows? Perhaps if Starmer is once he's removed as leader for Labour, then Labour leader boots him out like he did to Corbyn. He joins the Lib Dems, though they'd be stupid to bring him in, I think, or foolish. But yeah. And Scoman says, I mean, much like how Keir won a bajillion seat majority, the only reason Davey won so many seats is the Tory vote collapsed. And he's going, the thing with Davey is, yes, he's an achiever in what he did in 2024, but that looks like looking at what a manager did last season in football. Yes, overachieved then, but underachieving now. And an insult on the centre left is calling Lib Dems that. No, I don't think a leader change for Lib Dems would increase their ceiling. Lib Dems won't support civil liberties anymore. Davey and that party's now addicted to banning things. So just like Labour, Libs have peaked. They're kind of the party out of time without a point of purpose. Yeah, the only way I see Lib Dems, if they somehow become leader of the opposition, it's because Labour's collapsed so badly. But yeah. Anyway,
to go over some of those things, yeah, the bit about Davy and banning things like, yeah, that's what I go back to with the whole that Charles Kennedy era of focusing on civil liberties and combating Blair's authoritarianism. That era of the Lib Dems is long gone. Like, all those people have just left or quit politics overall. Like, they're gone. That tendency is not coming back anymore. Um, and yeah, I think Josh says it here that best sums up the Liberal Democrats at the moment. They're a party out of time, without a point or a purpose. As I
Okay.
said, they're essentially the wallpaper of British politics. They exist as a part of the background, but nothing more than that.
Okay. Well, and I suppose we'll go to some parties that now do seem to have a future. The first being Plaid Cymru. What do you think's going to happen to them after the locals and all that stuff? I assume at the very least we've talked about them a bit, but at the very least we think they're going to form a government at the very least with the
Well,
Greens
I
or
think
Labour.
they have one of two ways that they can go. Either they end up becoming the Welsh version of the SNP and dominate the Welsh Senedd as well as the Welsh political landscape in general, much like how the SNP have dominated the Scottish political landscape since 2007, and they end up doing to Labour in the 2029 general election what the SNP did to Labour in the 2015 general election. And basically, they become a pillar of British politics in a way that the SNP have become a pillar of British politics, where they just have a huge amount of representation in Parliament, and it increases focus and attention towards Wales. And maybe they even campaign for Welsh independence and they increase the salience of Welsh independence, much like the SNP did. Basically, that's one future. Plaid essentially becomes the Welsh version of the SNP and achieves the same success that they did. The other option is they get into government, they're woefully inexperienced, woefully unequipped to the task, and their policies, particularly their NIMBYism, causes Wales to stagnate. They flounder in government, sort of like how a fish does out of water, and they crash and burn and fade into irrelevancy after one term in government. That's the way the Plaid Cymru could go. It's one of those two directions. It's either they become the new SNP, the Welsh version of the SNP, and dominate Welsh politics, or they crash and burn and fade into irrelevancy.
Okay. Fair enough. So basically, become the SNP or become Labour now. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's essentially that's their future. It's either become the SNP or become Starmer's Labour.
yeah.
Like, it's one of those two options applied. As of which one I think is the most likely to happen, it's very, very difficult to say, to be honest with you, because Welsh voters are part of the reason why the SNP continues to do so well to this very day, despite all of its problems and scandals, is because of the power of nationalism. Like, nationalism is a massive motivating force for pretty much every country and people on the planet.
Ah,
And
yes.
that nationalism has enabled the SNP to survive through thick and through thin, and even at their lowest points, has enabled them to retain huge amounts of support and even managed to overcome the incumbency factor, with long incumbency acting as a weakness, to the point now where Scotland under them has essentially become a dominant party democracy because they've ruled it for so long. Um, I think, like, at this point we're coming up to where there's been nearly a whole generation of Scots who have lived their entire lives under SNP rule, who are now coming into adulthood,
Oh, yeah,
which is
if you were born in 2007, I think, you're basically you'll be around 19 now, and it's like in a year time, it'll be 20 years of SMP. So it's like that is basically adulthood.
yeah, like they've ruled Scotland for a generation at this point, so they've
Yeah.
essentially become institutionalized within the system of Scottish politics, and they are a core part of Scottish politics and will remain so for basically until Scotland becomes an independent country. Like
Oh
they're
yeah.
not going, like the SNP are not going anywhere. The
Yeah.
only way they will ever fade from relevancy would be if Scotland becomes independent. But other
Oh
than
yeah.
that, they're going
Oh
nowhere. But
yeah.
the key problem that Plaid has, which makes it difficult to replicate that SNP success, is that Welsh voters are not, at least at the moment anyway, as nationalistic as Scottish voters are. Welsh independence is nowhere near as popular as Scottish independence is, both now in the present day and historically speaking. So so Plaid doesn't have that rallying cry of nationalism that the SNP does that enables them to survive through thick and thin, which means that they'll be judged the same way that any other non-nationalist party in this country is judged. They'll be governed, they'll be judged based on how well they govern. And so they need to govern really well in order to be continuously relevant in Welsh politics.
Okay.
And if they fail in any way and they fail badly, then that is them finished, similar to Labour at the moment now.
Oh yeah.
So that's the biggest flaw that Plaid Cymru has that prevents them from becoming the next SNP, at least at the moment, is that nationalism just isn't as strong in Wales as it is in Scotland. So they can't piggyback off of that in the same way that the SNP does, at least for now, anyway.
Uh,
Things may change in the future where Welsh nationalism may become more salient in the future, especially if British politics continues to fragment and
uh,
Westminster
oh yeah.
continues to fail.
Oh yeah. Because like let's see, the SNP. There was one chance to get rid of the SNP, and Starmer's blown it, but we'll get to them in a bit. Joshua said Plaid could end up with 21 seats at a GNE, and that will be our 2015. Apollo says, fingers crossed, Burnham crushed Plaid support and actually helps Wales. That is, let's see if he gets to become PM. Plaid, our bizarre party with its NIMBYism, isn't consistently held. And he says, like, it's all up to the players, Tom said, could go either way for Plaid. And Welsh independent support is growing, but still not that high, which is why it's smart that they haven't made a fuss about it with this election. So, yeah, they're arguably playing the long term at the very
Yeah,
least. They just got
yeah, Plaid has basically this election campaign. They've played it in a similar manner to how Sinn Féin does in the Republic of Ireland, where Sinn Féin focuses only on bread and butter issues and doesn't mention unification at all. They leave that to the northern part of their party to deal
yeah,
with. Plaid have essentially run their campaign in a similar manner to Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland rather than the SNP, because whilst Plaid does support Welsh independence, and it has done ever since Adam Price was leader, they haven't made it a focal point of their campaign because they know that Welsh independence is not popular at the moment. So they've played it quite well in that regard. But yeah, Plaid's real test is going to be how they perform in government when they take control of the Senate tomorrow. And if they want to remain a long-standing force in British politics and become the Welsh version of the SNP instead of just becoming another fad that vanishes after one parliamentary term, then they really need to take governing seriously and they need to really make an effort to improve the people of Wales's lives.
Yeah,
Because
there's
if they don't, it's over for them for good.
Yeah, there's also the factor that there may be some external issues that happen beyond their control. But yeah, but anyway, we've got the SNP now. Now, granted, you've already sort of kind of given an idea, but I suppose the one thing that the SNP want to do is what they always want to do: try and arrange to have a second independence referendum. Now, granted, there's no way in hell any UK government is going to do that, even if they get a majority, which is arguably the biggest case to argue for. But I think from what you predicted earlier, the SNP are not going to get a majority, and it might even decline their vote a bit, but stay in because of the Greens. Let's see, where would the SNP go for like a case for independence then or something is the thing, because they're not going to give it up, no matter.
With the SNP, I think that they'll continue more or less down the same path that they've been going since at least the Scottish independence referendum in 2014, where basically they will continue to make their case for an independence referendum, second one happening. And I think that what the SNP will do will depend upon how well they do in this election. I think that if the SNP end up doing what my prediction says they will, and where they win, but it's a reduced majority coalition with the Greens, I think that the SNP will mainly at that point focus more on bread and butter issues in Scotland, whilst keeping the independence debate salient in the public minds, in order to increase their support back to where it was before, and make Scots more willing to vote for them so they can finally get that independence majority, that majority in the Scottish Parliament that they've wanted for so long at this point. If they do, against all odds, manage to win a majority, then I think that at that point the SNP will laser focus on independence even more than they already do now, where basically it will become the only thing that they talk about. They won't mention anything else apart from just independence. And they will constantly mention it every single time that they're in the national debate. And they will bring it up at Westminster every single time that they can, and constantly demand that they will want an independence referendum. And I think that they will use the momentum of the Scottish Parliament elections, if they win a majority, to go into the general election to make their case for independence, where basically they will say that vote for us, have us win all of the seats in Scotland again, and help us reduce Labour's seat numbers in Parliament, so that they can not have a majority. They're forced to go into coalition with us, and we will get independence as a referendum, as a concession from them as part of going into government with them. I think that is going to be the SNP's strategy moving forward, depending on how these elections go. If they win a majority, it'll be laser focused on independence, going into the election, wanting to reduce Labour down to a minority, going into coalition with them, and then getting an independence referendum concession. If they don't, and they end up forming a reduced majority with the Greens, they'll still make that argument, but it won't be as vocal as if they won a majority. And ultimately, they will focus more on bread and butter issues to try and claw back the support that they've lost over the last couple of years.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, Scott Manor said, "Pride is big part of the election is childcare. They can construct a good childcare system; it'll be a success." And as he says here, the SNP will keep hobbling along until Scotland finally gets another referendum. Arguably, yes, this is the biggest problem, but yeah. Now, arguably, like you said, if they do keep, let's see, one way they could do it is that Labour has no choice but to get into coalition. The only thing that I'd say to that is the biggest problem with that kind of strategy is that let's see, the British press, particularly on the right, and let's see, opposition parties on the right, will just like use the SNP as like, if you vote for Labour, you get these guys into government. And some believe that that's why Ed Miliband lost in 2015, even though there's a whole other factor of reasons. But yeah, that's the biggest issue here. Anyway, Tom, would you like to talk about either Reform or the Greens next?
Let's go with Reform.
Okay, Reform Party. Arguably the ones that have the most to gain from like all these elections, basically.
Yeah,
So
the guys who will basically be the biggest winners of these elections in terms of outside of nationalist parties. I think that Reform is essentially going to try and use these elections to rebuild the momentum that they lost in the second half of last year, as well as the momentum that was lost from all of the Tories that they kept appointing into their party, where they will stop doing that now because it caused a backlash to them. But that's, I think, Reform's goal. I think that Reform's goal is essentially to use these elections to further rebuild and then build up upon that, their momentum, and use that as a springboard going into the next general election. I think that the one thing that Reform is definitely going to do as after these elections is they're going to shift even more to the right than they already are. And I think that if Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain, Greater Yarmouth, whatever it is, group ends up doing quite well in the Great Yarmouth, Norfolk council elections, I think that that will further strengthen Reform's idea to go further right in order to win back the populist online right support that they have lost over the last few months. And yeah, over the last few months.
Even
So
though,
I think,
sorry, go
I
on.
think that Reform's main focus is going to be continue to focus on immigration, rebuild the momentum that they lost from the last couple of months, and shift further to the right in order to win back the support that they've lost to Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain, and try and avoid bringing any more unneeded controversy to them, such as bringing more Tories to their party. Essentially, Reform will double down upon what they've been doing recently and shifting more to the right, more on culture wars, more on immigration, and really sort of embracing that British AFD type label.
Okay. And if they do that, you think they'll get them more votes in the end, or do you think they'll put them off of the more moderate, I guess you could say, voters that would consider voting for them?
It depends upon how they go about playing it. I think if they focus on immigration more than the culture war stuff, then I think that they will be able to rebuild and then maintain the momentum that they had towards the end of last year before they blew it by appointing all of these Tories into their party. I mean. But if they focus too much on culture, I think that you'll get a repeat of what happened last year, where they will surge in support and they'll lose it all because they just focused way too much on culture than on things that people care, and then on immigration, which is what people care about the most. I also think that Reform will probably begin to define itself more moving forward. Whereas the party at the moment is primarily known for being the Nigel Farage immigration party, I think they will come to define themselves more in other policy areas moving forward. I think they'll begin to develop a much more coherent economic policy, foreign policy, and policies outside of immigration, like welfare, taxes, and stuff of that nature. Essentially, they'll more solidify as a party rather than a movement. which is what they currently are at the moment. And the
Okay.
final thing I think they'll do as well, but this will be something more towards the end of this year, going into next year's locals. I think the party will try and look for a future beyond Farage. Now, I don't mean that they're going to get rid of him. They're not going to do that at all. But what I mean is that one day Farage is going to go, going to resign from politics. And what Reform wants to do is they want to make sure that they don't end up the same way that a party like UKIP did, where they were only popular because of Farage, and once Farage left, they just completely descended into right wing insanity and have lost all support as a result of that. So I think that the Reform will try and look to a future beyond Farage so that the party can continue after he eventually leaves.
Okay. Wait, who eventually leaves? Farage or?
Farage.
Oh yeah, because at the moment, if he goes, Reform basically collapses.
Yes, and I think that Reform towards the end of this year will try and look to formalise some kind of structure beyond him so that the party just doesn't perish when he eventually goes like UKIP did.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, we got some comments from Party D saying I'll be voting Reform today. Doubt that they'll take my word off the Lib Dems though. I'd vote Restore if they were going to stand though, which I suppose I should be glad I don't have any locals in my ward today. But see, I'm just canvassing out in others. And we've got a comment from Frank Indigo saying, "Are you lot still going?" Haha. Yes, and though we might be in the end soon.
Finished. We've got like about 1 or 2 more parties to do, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Anyway, the next party to talk about will be none other than the Green Party, basically, under Zach Polanski. What's likely to happen with the Green Party with these locals? Because they've been in the news quite a bit with, like, the you could say, arguably, the mainstream media, or particularly those on the right of the Labour Party, attacking them, accusing them of being, well, Corbyn's Labour, basically.
Yeah, the Greens are kind of in a very unusual spot at the moment because they are going to be the second biggest beneficiary of these elections, and they will do incredibly well in all of the urban areas, particularly in the London boroughs. And they will probably see a very big poll surge as a result of that, although I don't think it will be as big as what Reform got last year and what they will get this year once these locals are over. What happens with the Greens moving forward, how successful they'll be, will really depend upon how they're able to deal with both media scrutiny and as well as leadership style. I think the Greens really need to, if they want to be a viable party going to the next election, really need to sort of reel it in and crack down on the more unhinged elements of their coalition, like the ultra terminally online radical left types, whose only purpose is to basically tank the Green Party and make it look like a bunch of unhinged wackos. And I think that Polanski himself needs to be a lot better at message discipline and a lot less reactionary to events. Like, a lot of people do admire his style, where he just basically goes all in on hardcore social progressivism and left-wing economics. But the problem with that is that that is essentially a hot potato strategy where it works until it doesn't work. And what recently happened with the police situation in Golders Green is a good example of what happens when it doesn't work. And it's very, very bad. So I think the Greens, after this election, is going to be in a very strange position because they will surge in support and they will celebrate big time from these elections, but the media scrutiny upon them is going to be extremely intense afterwards, at least as much as intense as it was on Corbyn. And if the Greens are not careful, they run the risk of repeating the exact same mistakes that Corbyn did and his momentum what did during the Corbyn days.
Okay.
So
I suppose there are some things more in favour of the Green Party than they were with Corbyn and his Labour, if you will. Like, for one, arguably, Zach Polanski isn't going to be passive as Corbyn and will take some action. The only question is if he will take the right action, I guess. Two, let's see, the Green Party doesn't have like the internal infighting that Labour did have under Corbyn then, and for the most part, they're behind Polanski, if you will. Three, arguably one of the things that have been going on, it's like, let's see, that's caused this commotion is like, of course, the conflict between in the Middle East and arguably most people's opinions on, well, particularly the Israeli government has arguably become a lot more negative, despite, let's see, because some of the attacks are more related to the criticism of that. So that's arguably not going to probably work as much. And arguably for Zach Polanski is kind of like a Jewish himself, so that might not as effective for some people as it will. Granted, I'm understanding, let's see, that some Jewish communities really hate Zach Polanski and will vote against him because they support, I guess, the Israel in some form or another. But yeah, arguably, Polanski is not as, let's see, timid as Corbyn was, if you will, and is likely to try and deal with this problem sooner rather than later. I don't know. Would you say I'm right on this, or do you think that doesn't really matter too much? Or
mostly, I would say, yeah. The advantage that Polanski has over Corbyn is that he's not indecisive like Corbyn was. And that was one of the biggest things that brought down Corbyn in the end, because it made him look like an incredibly weak leader that couldn't lead anything, let alone a country. So Polanski being a much more decisive and strong leader helps him. The Greens are also not as fractured as Labour was and are united behind a common purpose and don't have to deal with the constant sabotage that Labour had to deal with during the Corbyn days. Well, Corbyn had to deal with from Labour during those days. But the disadvantages that the Greens have that Labour didn't is that there's no moderating factor within the Green Party. So whilst they go hardcore in one direction, the problem with doing that is that you turn not only a lot of people off from voting for you, but you also enable a lot of people to vote against you as well. The biggest flaw that Corbyn had when it came to electoral performance is that whilst he inspired people who would have otherwise never voted to vote for him, he also equally inspired people that would have never voted to vote against him as well. And the Greens run a similar risk of something like that happening if they don't reel in their more radical elements. And I
okay,
think that for Polanski himself, I think the best advice that he really could do at the moment is that he needs to, in certain situations, especially during crisis moments where you don't have all of the facts and things don't initially appear as they seem, I think that he needs to think before he acts and also take on the advice that not every situation needs a reaction. Sometimes it is better to say nothing or at least just wait until all the facts are out.
it's like wait a week or something.
Yeah. Like, like with the Golders Green situation, for example, the best thing that he really should have done with that is he should have done a boilerplate statement condemning the attack and condemning anti-Semitism and all sorts, then wait a week afterwards when all of the facts have been collected and we know the general broad outline of what's happened before you give a more in-depth comment. Don't react to every situation with a response, because sometimes that can backfire on you massively, as it has done at the moment.
Yeah, no, arguably, I'd say he still has a chance to recover, but even
Oh
though
yeah,
the
it's not over for him. He's not doomed. He's still got a chance to recover from this. But again, the problem is that if it continuously happens, it happens again and again and again, then eventually it builds up, and then you just completely lose all credibility, and there's
yeah,
no way you
well,
can come back at that point.
yeah, no, I do think that he does seem to be a type to at least take in this lesson at the very least, or at least learn from it. But who knows? But there's also the fact that despite the attacks, it's not going to affect the Greens' performance, at least this locals. So
No,
it might,
this won't impact their locals' performance at all.
yeah,
You can see that in the polling. The polling hasn't changed.
yeah. If let's see, but yeah, if anything, let's see, people might end up starting to forget about it a little bit, except maybe the more diehard anti-Green lot.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, let's see. Going to a bit of more some of the comments. May God find you, Dan. Danny Krug. Let's see. TT says Danny Kruger would go down with a public better than Generic or Braverman, in my opinion.
Probably. Yeah.
But let's see. Stats for lefties types don't help Greens, and this worst one is like Hassan Parker knows similar back implant skin Greens doesn't help them either. Well,
Yeah, it doesn't. Like,
yeah.
people like that back in the Greens is not good for the Greens at all, and they should be very careful bringing that sort of people on board, because it can, as I said, it can be it can have the same problem that it did in the Corbyn days, where it can just really backfire on you and it just nothing good comes from it.
But yeah, I suppose one thing you could say, the Greens have at the moment strong left-wing voices. It seems they have. That seems they're lacking is strong left-wing voices. You know, ones that like kind of competent and say, "Well, chill down, dude. Witsy, I agree with you, but let's tone it down a bit." That's basically, I think you could say. But yeah, I suppose the only other party you maybe want to talk about is, let's see, your party, if you want to bring about, and what do you think is going to happen to them?
They'll just go the same way that every other communist party in this country has gone, get maybe 500 votes, if that, but have no success beyond that, to be honest with you. I mean, your party is essentially, Corbyn's party is essentially finished. Like, it's irrelevant at this point. Like, they had their chance and they completely wasted it with the typical bog standard far left infighting that's just ripped them to pieces. Like, that's all there really is to say about your party. They had great potential, but they utterly squandered it because of pointless, stupid infighting. And now they have essentially just become dime a dozen Communist Party and nothing more than that. Like, they're essentially Communist Party 5. Like, you know how you like have a naming convention for like random generic things that don't matter? That's essentially what Corbyn's party is at this point. It's just Communist Party 5. Like, it's no different from the Socialist Workers' Party or the Communist Party of Great Britain or anything like that, and it won't achieve any success whatsoever. That's what happens when you bring in somebody like Zara Sultana to your party. And if anything, the only thing that your party exists for is it serves as a warning to the Greens as to what happens if you let the extreme radical elements of your party take over.
Oh yeah.
That is the only thing that your party exists for at this point. It serves as a warning to any potential left-wing party that's actually serious and not just a joke like your party is.
I suppose that's probably the one good thing about your party is that it shows the Greens. Okay, they have shown this is what happens if we do this. Let's chill it back a bit. Now, whether or not they learn that lesson remains to be seen. But let's see. I suppose your party's still being a bit crazy. And interesting here, Party D says either this Polanski Sander moment is over now and it actually helps long term, or carries on and then on until the age. I think he meant GE, and says I think it slightly impacts locals actually. And Skullman thinks 371, and I think that might be a reference to some numbers of votes. But yeah,
that's in reference to my statement about Communist Party 5. Like, he's just saying it's Communist Party 371 because that's what it is. It's just another Communist Party. There's nothing special about it. It's just Communist Party 375.
Yeah, who knows? If you want, maybe down the line we can do a stream about the fall of your party. So let's see.
Maybe one day. I mean, I don't even think they're even running candidates. Like, the only thing that they've got is they've got a couple of locally independent groups that are affiliated with them, but they're not formal candidates.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Yeah, they've really botched the whole candidate thing, and apparently Restore might gain 5 to 9 seats in Norfolk County Council, which I don't know if that, but I don't really care about Restore, unless if Restore gets more seats in your party, it'll be funny. It'll be kind of sad actually. Workers will probably outperform your party. That is true.
Certainly, yeah, they'll outperform. Yeah. And to be honest with you, considering that. Well, to be honest with you, Restore only needs to win like 2 seats, and then they beat your party because your party has got literally no candidates. So
yeah. But who knows? To be honest, frankly, I'm thinking after the locals, besides maybe talking about the aftermath, I'm more interested in doing a the rise and fall of the Labour Party, if you will. Well, just go out for its like 126-year history, because that'll be much more of an interesting stream, if you ask me.
Possibly, yeah. But yeah, that's really all there needs to be said about your party. Like, the whole situation is just very sad. Just a complete waste of opportunity and potential, and now it's just all been subsumed by the Green Party. Total shame.
Oh yeah, I was at least hoping for at least some permanent left-wing opposition in case the Greens went back to whatever they were before Polanski, but we'll have to wait and see. And Apology says, I remember when I said in Bullet that the radical conservative alarmists will take over your party, and Corbyn and Markson's members in your party were in delusion about it. Oh yeah.
To be fair, those radical conservative types never overtook the party. They all got kicked out. Instead, all that just happened is they basically just became another generic communist party, no different from the Socialist Workers' Party or the Communist Party of Great Britain.
Yeah, arguably, your party might have been able to become something, but I think the biggest problem for them was the fact that Zara Satana kind of became a part of that, like a movement or planning that group, if you will, or even just shoved herself in, because I think every trigger of conflict was caused by her in some way or another. I hate to say. I'm not sure if you agree with that. I mean, granted, Corbyn's to blame in some regards, but I do think Zara Satana was the one that stirred up the conflicts, really. It is Zara Satana, right?
Yeah, it was her. I mean, she just likes looking for a fight. That's really all it boils down to. She just likes confrontation.
Yeah, it's like, pick your if you like a fight, pick your battles at least. Yeah. That didn't happen. A party need the tepid bureaucrats won. Your party officially standing 20 candidates in 17 wards.
But are they
Oh.
actual candidates though, and not just independents, but backed by them? Well, that's core difference.
Let's see. Workers' Party is standing 70 candidates in 59 wards. And Scott Ehrman says, not quite, Tom. Your party is basically Greens now.
Or you could say that the Greens are your party.
TUC standing 285 candidates. And
Trade Union Socialist Coalition, I think that is TUS.
okay. SDP 48.
Yeah, SDP, Social Democratic Party.
Yeah, that one I know, but yeah. So yeah. Well, I think we have basically covered everything for this last prediction. We'll have to wait and see tomorrow if the results are. Though granted, that will likely be Swiss's stream, of course. Now, whether or not he does an aftermath stream in the following few days on the weekend remains to be seen, because I may do one as a result. But if not, likely streams are. Sorry, what?
My guess is Swiss will probably do a night stream that will go for like 3 or 4 hours, and then he'll carry on that stream on Friday afternoon, because that's what he did with the locals last year. Plus the fact that these locals are going to be very staggered. Like, there's a whole bunch of English councils during the night on, well, Friday early morning. And then there's also the Senate elections are on Friday, and they'll
Okay.
carry on through to Saturday. Same with the Scottish Parliament elections. The results won't be fully counted until like Saturday evening, and there's no recounts.
Okay, fair enough.
Me personally, on that night, I'll be staying up until about 3 in the morning on Friday night, because my council is counting at 3 in the morning. So I want to get the results of my council in, and then I'll go to bed at that time.
Okay.
As for when the first results come in, results will start coming in 1 in the morning on Friday, and it will just carry on trickling through each then. But yeah, the first results for the locals will come in at 1 in the morning on Friday. So keep an eye out for that period of time.
Okay. So, out of curiosity, who do you think's going to win in your local council?
My local council will basically become a Reform Lib Dem contest, a two-party system essentially. Labour, Tories will get wiped out here. If Labour and Tories are lucky, they'll keep one seat in the wards that they're fighting in, but everything else will go to Reform and the Liberal Democrats, with Reform being the biggest beneficiaries. Portsmouth Council used to be a lot more ideologically diverse, but it's not anymore. Nowadays, it's Tory, Labour, Reform, and Liberals. In the past, it was Tory, Labour, UKIP, Reform, and an independent group, as well as independents in general. But the problem is that all of these independents ended up joining Reform. So there's the Portsmouth Independence Party, it was called, they merged with Reform, so they've all just joined up with Reform now. I suspect that what will happen is that Reform will probably take all the Labour and Tory seats that are up for election, apart from maybe one of each. The Lib Dems will stagnate and keep what they already have, and the council will be no overall control, with the Lib Dems as the largest party. Basically, the only difference is that Reform will become the official opposition to the Lib Dems in my council, but I'll be shocked if anybody wins an outright majority here.
Okay.
It'll just be no overall control, Lib Dems largest party, which is what it's been for the past 16 years at this point.
Oh yeah. The only thing is, they no longer just elect Lib Dem MPs.
Yeah, I mean, it's really weird because despite the fact the Lib Dems had a very strong control of the council and have done for years at this point, apart from the Blair years, they've never really done well at the Westminster level in this seat. The only time they did well was during the Blair years when they had Mike Hancock in charge. But I think a lot of that was mostly down to him personally. But then he ruined his reputation when it was revealed that he was having an extramarital affair with a disabled colleague who was mentally disabled, so she couldn't really consent to it. So yeah, he completely ruined his reputation as a result of that. At least
Ouch.
allegedly, anyway. That's what they said in the newspapers. But whether it was true or not, I don't know. But that's what they said. But
Okay.
either way, after that happened, that was the end of the Lib Dems here at the Westminster level. And ever since then, it's been a battle between Tories and Labour in this city. And I suspect that it will be a battle between Labour and Reform now. And
Okay.
quite depressingly, I would not be surprised if at the next election I ended up with two Reform MPs
Yeah,
replacing the two Labour MPs that I've got.
yeah, you'd probably have to wait until Reform muck up before you get something else.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I know that Reform will win in Portsmouth North because that area went Labour last election. It had a very strong Tory support base there, and all of those people have now joined Reform. So they'll absolutely win Portsmouth North. Reform will. Portsmouth South is the only one I'm a bit skeptical of because the only hope Labour's got in holding that is if the students turn out and vote for them. If they do, they'll keep it. But if they don't, then Portsmouth South will go to Reform along with Portsmouth North. And that means I'll be stuck with two Reform MPs. Joy.
Okay. Well, the rest just a few comments saying, yeah, it's official your party candidates, but many of the wards also have workers standing in the same one. Senedd and Hollywood counting Friday morning. I live in Cambridgeshire. I expect to be applied in two reforms in Senedd. And the politics say some wards in Birmingham have 2 seats up, but 15 candidates. Labour, Workers, Green, Reform, Tory, Independence, your party, Lib Dems, all 2 candidates. Fair enough. Well, regardless of when the results are called, if Swiss doesn't do it, at the very least, I might do maybe a Welsh or Scottish result if Swiss doesn't do one. But if not, who knows? But yeah, I'm thinking of maybe see if Starmer's going. Maybe I get to finally do that post World War II tier ranking of PMs, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah,
but yeah, I've got a few ideas for streams, but it really depends what Swiss does and when you're available. But anyway, Tom, thank you for doing this stream to with me tonight. I mean, curious to see what your thoughts would be for local elections, but I guess I'll see you next time and likely on Swiss's channel tomorrow.
yeah, probably see each other tomorrow on Swiss's stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Paul TD. Great stream. Yep. Only Gritzy had some issues at the beginning, but other than that, it was fine. Well, everyone, this is Cooperman257. Gritzy signing off. I hope you all have a good day. Thank you, Paul TD and Skullman in particular, for your comments. And I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.
Goodbye.